I have never seen a better example of a subverted expectation than in Rian Johnson's Knives Out. Like seriously, if you want to shock your audience and do it right, where it's not just a cheap trick, but instead it's something that improves the whole story, there truly is no better case study than Knives Out. But hold on a minute, this makes no sense, right? Because Rian Johnson's last film was The Last Jedi, a film overwhelmingly criticised for the fact that it subverted people's expectations. What? Clearly something's amiss here. The truth is, the story behind Knives Out fascinates me, but it wasn't the plot, although that was great. Rather, it's what happened behind the scenes, because it's a rare day when we have such a crystal clear example of a director using a device in one work and failing to use it correctly. Then they learn their mistake and bring that forward and use that exact same device to achieve an outstanding result in their very next work. In short, this video looking at Knives Out isn't just about how to do a plot twist and subvert expectations correctly, it's also about the redemption of Rian Johnson and how he learned a valuable lesson about how to do a subversion, one I can't wait to share with you all today. But before we talk Knives Out, we need to address the elephant in the room. The Last Jedi was, how should I put it, a slightly divisive film.
I would be worried if everybody across the board was like, yeah, that was a good movie. It's much more exciting to me when you get, a group of people who are like, literally saying that was the worst movie I've ever seen. Having those two extremes to me is, the type of movie that I want to make.
Coming over the top!
And with The Last Jedi, Rian Johnson was clearly making an intentional effort to be divisive. And what's worth saying is when it comes to fiction, there are very, very few things that are inherently bad, and that includes being divisive. But how is it okay to tell a polarizing story? Well, I think a great example would be stories that cover highly controversial subjects. For example, American History X. A lot of people hated that film because it explored such a taboo topic as it did, although I won't say what that topic is because I'll get hit by the demonetization hammer if I just say that one word. But I think the biggest error in Johnson's intentions in being divisive with Star Wars wasn't that in itself, but it's because he went about it in all the wrong ways. He wasn't divisive because he raised valid and interesting questions that some people just prefer not to be raised. It's instead because he achieved his goal of division by compromising fundamental aspects of his story for a quick, short-term cash-in of shock. He achieved his desired polarity by intentionally incorrectly using storytelling devices and decreasing the quality of his work, or as everyone called it back then, subverting expectations. But how the hell does Knives Out relate to this? Well, in short, the Rian Johnson who made The Last Jedi is not the same one who made Knives Out, because he's clearly learned a valuable lesson since then, and it's something he really should be commended on. And what I think that lesson was, is that a subversion done right doesn't just not reduce the quality of your story, it instead enhances it. And really, I think Johnson realised that there are three core rules that decide whether or not your subversion of expectation will be an asset to your story or a detriment. And the first rule to making any form of subversion, shock or twist in your story good is it must enhance your story going forward. Secondly, it must have a strong verisimilitude with the story's logic that's come before. And thirdly, this is the big one, this is the main reason why The Last Jedi's twists and turns just didn't work. It has to be in keeping with all the promises that you've made so far to your audience. And what you'll see once we've broken all of these three down is how The Last Jedi breaks all of these rules and Knives Out passes all three with flying colours. So firstly, how is it possible for a subversion of expectation to enhance your story? It's easy to say, well, it should just enhance your story, but how does a good subversion actually do that? Well, the main subversion in Knives Out is the fact that it flips genres a third of the way through. The entire advertising campaign of this movie, and also the whole first act, is all about this movie being a whodunit. They are trying to find Harlan Thrombey's killer, but then at the end of the first act we have a flashback that tells us exactly who did it and seemingly answers all of the questions. All of a sudden, with the flip of a coin, this is no longer a whodunit, it's a how the hell is she gonna get away with it. And what I love so goddamn much about this twist is how wonderfully it serves the story going forward. Like, Jesus Christ, I love this. Like, Rian Johnson, I actually love you for this. Like, if you're watching this and we ever just happen to, like, meet up one day, I promise I will buy you, like, 10 rounds of drinks because of just how genius what you've done here was. But the reason why this subversion is so good is because Johnson weaponizes the tropes of the genre. Because now the tropes of the murder mystery genre are themselves the antagonists. Because of the flashback, the audience believes that Marta poisoned Thrombey by accident, and so far, Marta's been a thoroughly kind and likeable person, and because of that, we're rooting for her to succeed. But in every murder mystery, the detective always catches the killer. Like, always. At the end of every murder mystery, the detective stands around all the suspects, has a monologue where they go through all the clues, and then he points at the person who did the deed, and then they get caught. It's just a trope that every murder mystery has. And on a meta level, not just by looking at this film itself, but rather the context of our culture, we're now even more invested in the story because Johnson, as a result of subverting the genre, exploits those tropes to make the audience truly believe that the detective will find her out by the end of the story, and she will go to jail. And these subverted tropes combine with how much the audience is rooting for her to get away with it to create some really, really compelling engagement. Like, I'm sorry, I very rarely use naughty words on this channel, but I'll make an exception just once. This is fucking genius. Like, I cannot get across how goddamn, like, clever this is. Like, this is the first time I've ever seen a story exploit and weaponize its own tropes by subverting them in this way. Like, I'm just... God, I love this movie! Like, seriously, this genre twist in Knives Out is one of the best subversions I've seen. Maybe even the best I've ever seen, because it isn't just a lazy subversion like in The Last Jedi where it's purely for the shock. Instead, it does an outstanding job at raising the stakes and increasing audience investment going forwards. What Knives Out demonstrates really quite well is that Rian Johnson has the best mentality when it comes to being a writer-director. Like, the film proves that he's striving to improve himself so he can tell better stories. And if you're a writer, you should always be on the lookout for more resources to learn from so you can improve your craft. And when it comes to a great place where you can find no end of material to learn from, Audible has a trove of interesting audiobooks that I've personally learned a ton from, and I can happily thank Audible for sponsoring today's video. A while ago I recommended you guys check out the audiobook for Save the Cat by Blake Snyder because it's full of some really good tips for writing screenplays, and it especially helps if you're having plotting issues. But recently I've been listening to Save the Cat Writes a Novel, and it's basically Save the Cat, but it's, well, you guessed it, about how to write novels, and it somehow got even more useful tips than the original Save the Cat. Like, really, like, if you're interested in telling stories on the screen or in the book, and you have the downtime because maybe there's a certain event going on where everyone's stuck at home, a great way to fill that time in a productive way would be by checking out either Save the Cat or Save the Cat Writes a Novel on Audible. Both of them are full of some really good advice for you to learn from. And all you have to do to check one of them out is to click my link in the description, that's audible.com/closer look, or text closer look to 500 500 and you'll get a free 30-day trial, 2 free Audible originals, and a free credit that's good to redeem any audiobook you like on their platform. But if I had to boil it down to just one, I'd recommend you get Save the Cat Writes a Novel because it's slightly longer and has got slightly more actionable advice for you. Like, this audiobook is free, like, you can listen to it immediately, and all you have to do to collect it is click my link in the description, that's audible.com/closer look, or text closer look to 500 500 and get your free audiobook today. So anyway, back to the video. As for rule 2, the subversion must have a strong verisimilitude with the story told before. I didn't know that this word existed when I made my Skyrim video a few months back, but now I do. Please, please forgive me. Jesus Christ, you guys really did not forgive me for that one in the comments. But essentially, verisimilitude means that a thing makes perfect logical sense in light of all the other logic that surrounds it. Now, you may think that, well, all that means when it comes to twists in a story is foreshadowing, and in some subversions, like your traditional plot twists, that can be totally true. But it isn't always. And here's a great example of how foreshadowing isn't everything. Instead, verisimilitude is. The infamous scene from The Last Jedi where Rey gives Luke his old lightsaber and then he throws it over the cliff. The reason why this subversion just doesn't work is because it completely goes against Luke's character and what he would actually actually do in this scenario. Like, this lightsaber was created by his father. For the longest time, it was his mentor's. For the longest time, it was his. Even if he's denounced being a Jedi and has become a cynic, this weapon would still be of incredible sentimental value to him. And it is a family heirloom, the only heirloom that Luke has. And the fact that he casually throws it away without a second's thought, like it's a used tissue paper, totally goes against his character. In this case, it's an issue of verisimilitude as to why this subversion just doesn't work, not foreshadowing. This also cuts the other way, because if you have a twist that's got really bugger all foreshadowing, but it's got a really great verisimilitude where it's totally in line with your story's logic, it makes that twist so much more likely to be a good one, and it makes it far easier for your audience to swallow that twist. A great example would be Ned Stark's death in Game of Thrones. This is why I'm saying your shock, twist, or subversion needs verisimilitude, and not necessarily foreshadowing, because Ned Stark's death is a great twist, and it's got basically no foreshadowing. With this scene, everyone who hadn't read the books beforehand expected Ned's life to be spared, then for him to go on and join Jon in the Night's Watch. Okay, look, it's been a while since I saw the show, so maybe I'm wrong, I'm sorry if I am, but I can't remember this moment having any foreshadowing in the show. But when Joffrey says,
Sir Ilyn, bring me his head,
it's incredibly shocking, but it also totally works because it makes perfect sense. Like, yes, by killing Ned Stark, Joffrey will start a war. He will create massive friction with his relations to the north, and it's a move that any wise, level-headed king would never do, but that's not who Joffrey is. He's a naive child who totally lacks any wisdom, and to top it all off, he's an impulsive twat who loves hurting people and ruining diplomatic relations and starting a war that will kill thousands of his own people and make his life considerably harder going forward for no other reason than the pleasure of pleasing the mob, and seeing Ned die is completely in line with what Joffrey would have done if this story were real. As a result, it's a twist that works wonderfully, despite the fact that it has basically no foreshadowing. And okay, if we're making a video called How to Do a Plot Twist, we can't really do that title justice without covering foreshadowing, and in my opinion, the most cathartic kinds of plot twists are the ones where the clues are there, where it's possible for the audience to figure the twist out, but where the clues are so deftly placed that the audience only realises that they were in fact clues after the twist is revealed. Now, obviously, you can have a great twist that isn't this. Like, it's possible for someone to see your twist coming and still love it when it happens, but if you don't land in what I'd call like the plot twist sweet spot, where like the twist is extremely obvious in hindsight but not at all beforehand, then your plot might be criticised as being hackneyed because it's too easy to predict, or alternatively, it's nonsensical because it wasn't remotely possible to predict that twist beforehand, because you laid a poor groundwork for it. But a great example of foreshadowing done well in Knives Out is how Ransom is revealed to be the real killer behind it all. It turns out that he swapped Harlan's medication to trick Marta into giving him a lethal morphine dose, but what I love so much about this twist is how it lands so well in that sweet spot that we just talked about, where it's damn near impossible to figure it out beforehand, but extremely obvious in hindsight. And what I think's really interesting on how Johnson does this twist is how he uses a specific approach to foreshadowing that I absolutely adore. It's by carefully choosing the order in which we're fed the clues. And this is something that I think's wildly underestimated, because when people talk about plot twists, they often don't mention that the order in which you deliver the clues has a massive effect on how easy to guess the twist is, but it has basically zero effect on how cathartic that twist is when it happens. Okay, so the very first clue we get that Ransom is the murderer is right at the very start when Blank is interviewing the family, and we're told that at 3 o'clock in the morning, once everyone is in bed, the dog started barking, and we absorb this information. We have no idea what to make of it, so we just remember it and nothing more. But now, going forward, Johnson gives us the hints that help us piece together exactly how important that main clue was. Because throughout the entire film, the dogs are friendly to everyone they meet. Like, when Marta sneaks up in the night just after 12, they're friendly with her and don't make a sound. When Thromby's daughter arrives, they sprint towards her enthused. Like, at one point, one of them even plays fetch with Detective Blanc. Like, the only time in the whole movie where we see the dogs worked up is when Ransom first arrives and they harass him and bark loudly. Like, at one point, Blanc even says this:
Best judge of character is a dog.
Here, Johnson has told us that Ransom is the murderer. He's confessed it, we just don't realise it yet. Now this may sound odd, but trust me, it's totally true. If you're going for a plot twist, one of the best ways to do it is exactly how Johnson does it in Knives Out, and give the main foreshadowed clue first, and then slowly between then and when the plot twist happens, you drip feed in the hints and the information that allows the audience to make that connection. And even though Johnson does this rather cheeky approach to foreshadowing, when the finger of blame is finally pointed at Ransom, it's cathartic, not because we realise it's Ransom, but because we finally realise it could have only been Ransom, and the boot doesn't fit any other foot than his. And finally, let's talk about promises. I think this is the main issue most people had with The Last Jedi. We were promised certain things, and those promises were totally broken. Rey's parentage is a great example of this. So, J.J. Abrams, when he made The Force Awakens, essentially said, hey, we don't know who Rey's parents are, but I promise it's got a very interesting answer. Ooh, I wonder what's in this mystery box. Ooh, it's going to be a big reveal later on down the line. And even though J.J. Abrams had no idea what the answer to that mystery even was, still did a pretty damn good job at getting people hyped for this plotline, for this mystery thread that was going to take place in the other films. Lots of people were speculating. This promise, people were interested in seeing it delivered on. And then, of course, we have the moment where Kylo Ren just says, you remember that incredibly fun mystery that everyone was excited to see resolved? Yeah, there's the answer's mundane. Yeah, the answer's just boring. Your parents were nobodies. When Johnson did that, it achieved nothing. Absolutely nothing except disappointment, because it broke a promise made for a thoroughly pointless reason. And what I think's brilliant about Knives Out is how Johnson's clearly learned from this mistake, and he's realised just how important it is to keep your promises. And what he does that's really cheeky in Knives Out is he lets you think that he's broken his promises, but then subverts that and says, oh, just kidding, here's the answer that you all wanted. And it's this very, very, fun climax. But what is really good about the plot of Knives Out is how we have that murder mystery plot, and then it just fizzles out, it goes away. Now we have this entirely new plot of Marta trying to get away with it, and this is the best bit, because not just that plot we're invested in is resolved in the end, but the murder mystery plot that we all thought was just dead and buried, a promise that Johnson let us all think was broken when the movie changed genres, is resurrected. And now that second plot of her getting away with it recombines with the initial murder mystery plot as we realise that there's another malicious actor at play, and in the end, every single promise made and all these two plot lines, they collide seamlessly to result in a thoroughly cathartic climax when finally we realise it was Ransom who did it all, and then he gets taken away. And it's just such a satisfying climax when it happens. I am truly envious to my core of Johnson's achievements with Knives Out, because I couldn't even dream of writing a plot even half as perfect as this one. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please don't forget to click my link in the description to check out that free audiobook, and I'll see you guys next time on The Closer Look.